Hello, my name is Stephen Thomas, and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to walk you through setting up document ingestion using the retrieval, augmented generation, or RAG pattern with Azure Logic Apps. I'm going to walk you through setting up Azure AI, Azure Search, and Azure Logic Apps step by step. You need absolutely zero experience with any of these to get up and running, or even any experience with Logic Apps. I'm going to start completely from scratch. The goal is to give you hands-on experience with Azure AI technologies and Logic Apps, so you can build on top of what you see here for your own solutions. Presently, document ingestion using the RAG pattern can be accomplished by setting up a manual index inside of Azure Search, by using Azure OpenAI Studio, or by writing custom code. This video will show you how to automate this process with absolutely zero lines of code. Now, why would you want to use Azure Logic Apps for document ingestion? Well, it's quite simple. To get access to the over 1,000 pre-built connectors as a data source for all your ingestions. Now, what can be better than that? Before we start, it is helpful to have some basic understanding of some core concepts like RAG, indexes, vectors, and embeddings. This video is not going to go into detail about these concepts or why these are important to this demo. While having an understanding of these concepts is not needed to build out this example, it will help you tremendously throughout the process. I have put together a short list of videos that explain these core concepts much better than I can. Take a moment now if you don't understand them and jump in and take a look at some of these videos. You can always watch them at 1.5 speed. I have a link to these videos below. Look for the Getting Started with AI link. As we dive into our demo, I'm going to follow 9 tasks in a task list to accomplish this example. You can download this task list and the JSON file for the Azure Logic app using the download link below. They will be helpful if you want to do this on your own. If you get a chance to build this out on your own and even expand on it, post a comment. Let me know how it goes. With that, let's jump into our solution. Before we start diving into building things, let's take a quick look at our end solution. Our end solution is going to be this Logic app. We're going to use a recurrence trigger to list all PDF documents inside a blob storage account. We're then going to loop over each one of those PDF documents and process them. We're first going to call parse a document, which is going to convert the PDF document into text. This uses Apache Tika, which supports many different types of documents well beyond PDFs. We're then going to call chunk text, which will convert the long string of text documentation into manageable chunks for our models to consume. We're then going to call get multiple embeddings, which is a method inside of Azure OpenAI, which is going to take our text and convert it into vectors. Once we have our vectors, we're going to take that vectorized data. We're then going to take that vectorized data and format it according to our search index. Once we have it in the right format for our search index, we're going to call index multiple documents to insert all that data into Azure Search. Now, to set up all of this, we have a task list on our left, which we're going to walk through one at a time. Before we get started, let's talk quickly about the cost of this solution. Our largest cost is going to be our Logic Apps Standard Edition running in Azure. That's going to run around $5 in a 24-hour period. Our next highest cost is going to be our Azure Search. That comes in at about $2.50 for 24 hours. And the rest of the components are going to be pay per use. So keep that in mind when you build this solution and determine how long you want to keep it in your subscription. The next thing I want to talk about is problems you might run into when building this out. My number one problem is permissions. Even though I use managed identity throughout, it's very easy to miss something and things can definitely change over time. I'll try to point out scenarios where I've ran into permission problems and what I did to fix them. And last, we want to make sure that our Azure OpenAI component is in the same region as our Azure Search. This will cause us problems later on if that's not the case. So let's look over at our task list. And our first thing to do is to create a resource group. I've already created this resource group and put it in our East region. Next, we're going to create a Logic App standard environment to put our Logic Apps. Let's go ahead and do create resource. I'm going to select Logic Apps and come down here, create our Logic App. And here you have the choice between consumption or standard. What we're walking through here is only supported in standard edition, and I'm going to use the workflow plan. I'm going to select this, leave all these defaults, paste the name of my Logic App. And here I want to run it in the East US region so that we're all in the same region. I'm going to go ahead and create a new app service plan. And say OK. I'm going to use the smallest version here, which is going to be our WS1. Next, we're going to jump to storage. I'm going to go ahead and use the default storage that is recommending. This is to store our Logic App files. And we're not going to set anything in the rest of the components here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Review and Create. Now it's reviewing all the information that we set. To set this up, I'm going to simply click Create. The deployment is now in process, and I'll come back in a few moments when this is complete. Okay, that deployment is complete, so let's jump to our resource we just created. And I'm going to go ahead and create just a new workflow and add this process documents, make it stateful, and just get everything ready for us to come back to it later. Do a refresh and jump into our new workflow and go to code. Now I have an existing JSON outline for that workflow that we showed at the very beginning for our end solution. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. We're going to switch to designer view once we got everything set up, and I'll show you how to walk through it step by step and get everything set up. This is just going to save us a lot of time on the setup of things like the storage account. So now we have our Logic App all ready to go. The next step is to set up our OpenAI service. So I'm going to jump over here, and here we have our Azure OpenAI service. I'm going to go ahead and create new, and go ahead and put that in our new resource group, East US as our region, and I'm going to paste in our name. And pricing tier, we only have one option here. And we're going to set all the rest of the defaults. One thing I want to point out, so let's look at region. There are a limited number of regions that you can create Azure OpenAI. And these will kind of, what I've noticed, tend to come and go over time. So we'll want to jump over to AI Search and go ahead and create a new search while we're here. Again, set it to our same resource group and enter our service name here, and then here you can see we can select the region. So we want to make sure that we select the same region. So I'm going to select East US as well. And here we want to change the pricing tier. I'm going to use basic. You could use free. There's no cost to that. But with free, you don't get the ability to set up managed identity. So I'm going to use basic for that and just hit select. Now I'm first going to go back to OpenAI. Sorry to jump back and forth, but I think it's important to see how you could make sure these are set up in the same region. I'm going to just hit next on this, and next, because we're going to accept all the defaults, next, and create this resource. Now this deployment is going to take just a moment. I'm going to jump over and finish out our search over here. We take a look at scale. Not going to do anything with scale. It's just telling me my monthly estimated cost for this. No networking or tags I'm going to set. So review and create. And go ahead and create this resource while we're waiting for the other one. Going to jump back to Azure OpenAI for a moment. And once this is completed, I'm going to jump into this service. Okay, our OpenAI service is complete. I'm going to jump to that resource. And here we have to do a few things. If we look at our task list over here, the first thing is we need to enable managed identity, and that is done under Resource Management Identity. I'm going to say on and save this. And once that's done, let's go to keys and endpoints. It's going to tell you discard changes even though I saved them. I'm going to say OK. And here we want to capture this endpoint. This is going to be the endpoint we're going to use in our Logic app to connect to this service. And I've got all my endpoints down here. My Azure OpenAI connection. I'm going to paste that there. So we're going to come back and use that in a moment. And something else I want to show you here is under our task list for our AI service is we want to go ahead and create our models here. So we're going to use OpenAI Studio for this. So to get there, we click on Overview, and then we click Go to Azure OpenAI Studio. Now this is going to launch a new portal and a new window. And I'm going to see here, this is kind of my high-level overview page. All core information about the Azure OpenAI service that we just created is here. And what we want to do is create two different models. The reason we need two models is we need one model to do our GPT chat conversation, and we need another model to create our vectors for us. And those are actually two separate models. I'm going to go under Deployments, and I'm going to create two separate models here. Here's where it gets a little bit challenging. Quota in various regions runs out for various models over time. So when I ran this whole demo this morning, I was using ChatGPT 4 in the West region. I came in here this morning and everything was out of quota in the West region, which is why I've switched everything to the East region. So I'm going to go ahead and select ChatGPT 4 and say confirm. And here I have information about my deployment name, and you could leave this as the default or give it something specific. For our purposes, I'm going to leave this as the default, and I am going to select on Customize. You can see here it has the resource location of East US. If this was another location, I don't believe this matters. I haven't tested it using something like Japan, for example, but I believe this resource can live in another region and that's not going to impact things. I'm going to click on Customize, and I am going to up this token per minute limit to the max. Now, I thought I had a good understanding of what tokens were until I left this as the default, ran a single question into my model, and then got rate limited for the next several minutes after that. So apparently something was using tokens behind the scenes and I didn't realize it. So I'm just going to up this for this demo and say deploy. And that is going to be our GPT model. And the next thing we want to set up is our embeddings model. So to sort these by embeddings, I'm going to go to reference type and say embeddings. And we're going to select this bottom one just because last time I ran it, it was available in East US. Sure enough, it is. And we do want to make note of this and name of this embedding model here. We can call it whatever we'd like, but I'm just going to paste in our name here so that we can have that later. I'm going to leave it as default. Again, go under Customize and going to up these tokens per minute so we don't have any issues with that. Now, the cost differs based on what model you select here. You can go to the Azure Help Guides and they outline the cost. It's all in amount of tokens and cost. Some were as much as $30, as were some were like 50 cents for the same amount of tokens. So keep that in mind if you're sitting here running a bunch of queries through this, that there is cost associated with that, and it varies by model. So let's go back to our task list for our OpenAI service. And so we've created our managed identity and we've created our two models. Now let's go back to our AI search. That should be completed by now. And we're going to go to our resource. And the first thing we want to do here is enable our managed identity, just like we did before. And this is under Settings, Identity. And just like we saw before, say on and save. And that'll take that just a moment. So in addition to enabling managed identity, we also have to allow API access via managed identity. We do that under keys. This is our second step here. And here we have to have API access control. I'm just going to set that to both. And this is confirming that we want to change that service. And there's no save button here. It's just done when I select both there. Now we want to get the endpoints of this Azure Search that I just created. We'll do that on the overview page. I'm going to click on URL, copy this. And again, I'm going to paste this at the bottom here for our search. endpoint. And back up at our task list, that completes everything we need for AI Search. Next, let's jump into our storage account. Over here under storage, I'm going to say create new. And again, I'm going to put it in my same region there, paste the name of my storage account. Actually, I want to call this East and leave this in the East region. Select the blob storage as the service. I'm just going to set it as locally redundant storage just for this demo. And I don't need to set any of the other settings along here. So I'm just going to say review and create. And then create. And this will take it just a moment. While we're waiting for that, I will say dealing with the storage account has been my biggest issue when setting up this demo. Something as simple as reading from a storage account you'd think would be simple, but getting the permissions right was definitely a challenge. So our storage account is going to be read by our Logic app, of course. It's going to read the PDF documents and use them to send to Search. But we're also going to set up an Azure Search, it reading from our storage account to kind of prime our model for us. So with that, we need to add some permissions here. Now, I've played around with the permissions quite a lot. I've tried to assign more permissions than I think I need, and that seemed to backfire. So things tend to look for very specific permissions. So if you follow what's outlined in our task list, you should be okay there. So to set permissions, I'm going to go to Access Control, and I'm going to add permissions. And the first permission I want to add is for our Logic app, and that's going to be blob storage data owner. I'm going to come down here, storage blob data owner, say next, managed identity, select our Logic app standard, say select, click review and assign, review and assign, make sure you click it twice. And also going to add our AI search permissions, which is storage blob data reader. And say next, managed identity. Now, if you aren't seeing your search here, that means you haven't enabled managed identity on the search service. So jump over there and set that, and then come back. Now, once you do enable permissions in here and stuff like that, it could potentially take a few minutes or up to a few hours. In my experience, this has happened very quickly. So review and assign, review and assign. And now the last piece I need to do in the storage account section of our task list is create two containers. I'm going to go under data storage, say containers. And here I want to create one container for search. This is going to be how our search is going to natively import documents itself. And then let's create one for input, which is going to be the input to our Logic app. This is how we're going to get data into our Logic app. So once these are created, let's jump over to our Storage Explorer. Okay, and we're going to start by uploading a single document into our search blob container. Now, the purpose of this is just to use this for creating our index, our vectorization index. I found it was a lot easier to demo using the tool to import a sample file and vectorize it than it was to create everything by hand. So this is just a text file. It just has a few words in there. I think it says tests. This is a hotel search, something like that. And then I just want to upload a single document to our input folder. And this is going to be for testing our Logic app. I'm going to start with one, and I'll come back and upload everything else later. We'll get one working, and then we'll go from there. So with that, we have everything we need in our storage account. Let's jump back to our task list. Let's go to point 6 now. And I want to set my permissions. Oh, before I jump in there, I do need the connection for our blob storage account. So I get that under settings, endpoint blob services. So settings, go to endpoint and blob services. I am going to need this connection string right here. So I'm going to grab that and just paste it down here where everything else is living for now. Okay, and we're going to come back to that later. Next, let's jump back to our OpenAI service, and we're going to set some permissions. Jump back here, make sure I'm in my OpenAI service, and I'm going to go to Access Control Manager. And here I want to add, I'm going to do role assignment, and we need to add permissions for the Logic app, AI Search, and my user account, if you can believe it or not. Make this a little more legible here. All three of these need the same permission, which is going to be OpenAI contributor. So we're going to go ahead and select Cognitive Services, OpenAI, and I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can read it. And contributor, and say next. And here I'm going to use managed identity, and let's select those first. I need to add my Logic app, and I need to add my AI search. So I'm going to add my search service here and go ahead and select those. And let's go ahead and complete this. And once that's done, I'm going to add that same permission for my user account. If I don't add that for my user account, when I run this in the AI Studio, I'm going to get a permissions error, even though I am a tenant owner. So I'm going to come over here, contributor again, select users. In this case, I'm going to select both of my user accounts here and select those, review and assign, and go ahead and add those as well. And that's all we needed to do permission-wise for our OpenAI service. Let's jump down here and let's go to set permissions on our AI search. And we need to do set permissions for both our Logic app and our OpenAI service. So I'm going to jump over to my AI search and go to AIM just like I did before. And first thing I'm going to do is add our search index data reader for both our Logic app and our OpenAI. Search index data reader. Managed identity. I'm going to add this for our Logic app and our OpenAI service. Now, again, if you don't see your OpenAI service here, check that you've enabled managed identity. Review and assign, review and assign. Now, I'm going to go back and add search service contributor. And this task list will be downloadable. Just find the link below this video and you can download this task list. I suggest printing it, kind of checking it off as you go. And say search index data, search service contributor right there. Hit next. Managed identity again. I want my Logic app and my OpenAI service. Hit select on that. Okay. And last one is I need to add search index data contributor also to the Logic app. And search index data contributor. Say next. Managed identity. And to my Logic app. Okay, now that should do it for all our permissions and actually going in and creating our services and everything like that. Now let's go ahead and create our search index. I found the easiest way to do that is to import and vectorize data using this link right here. Now I'm going to walk through this wizard to select data to create a vectorized search index. I'm going to use Azure Blob Storage, and I'm going to select the account that we created and select my search container. This has that single document that I uploaded earlier. Going to use authentication using as managed identity. Go next, and this will take it just a moment to validate. And this is one of the places I have ran into issues. So if your permission on the storage account is not correct, you will get a red error message there. That was correct, so I went on through. That is the permission for the Azure Search service on the storage account, so keep that in mind. Here it's looking for what OpenAI search service to use for the embedding, and it'll auto select one here for you. If you have more than one in your region and subscription, you'll have a drop-down list there. If this doesn't populate, again, you'll want to check the permissions on that OpenAI service to make sure that it has the correct permissions as outlined in our task list for the AI search. And here we have our model that we want to use, and this is our embedding model that we created a few moments earlier. And I want to use system assigned identity again and say next. This is if we wanted to deal with images. We're not working with that right now. And I have the ability to automatically create this semantic ranker. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave that checked. And here I can name this item. Let's call it Vector AI Demo. And go ahead and do create. And this is going to create a series of artifacts inside of Azure Search for us. This will create our index. It'll create an indexer to import that sample data that we saw in our container that we'd uploaded, and it'll create a couple other components that we'll take a look at in a second. I could click start searching, but the indexer probably has not finished yet. So I click cancel out of that. And what we see here under search management is we do have our index. This was our index that we created. It does show 0 documents. And here's our indexer. Now, I will say this is the very first time out of 5 demo runs this has ever worked the first time. So that's a huge plus. Let's take a look at what this indexer does. This is a scheduler that you can set up, and this will import data from the location that we just specified when we went through the import wizard. You can see here that it says success. If there was an error, you'd be able to click on it and see the error information. If I wanted to run this again, I could just say run, and it's going to recheck for new documents in that storage location. We're happy with the way this is now. Let's mosey on down here and see data sources. It has created a data source for our blob storage that we specified, and then it has created some skill sets. This is how it's vectorizing the data. This is way beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this video, but you can see that this has been auto-created for us. The main thing is back here in this index. Now we have one document. I can click on this index, and it'll tell me the amount of storage and documents that are actually stored in this search index. I can do a search here, and it's going to pull back everything. There's just one document. It says test on hotels, exactly what I uploaded. Here we do want to take a look at the fields. The reason I use the import wizard is it auto creates these fields for us. We don't have to come in here and make this automatically. We do have our vector field here that was created automatically for us. So this is the definition of the input data that we'll send into the service from our Logic app. So with that, we are ready to jump over to our Logic app. We have all our prerequisite components created, and we have created our Azure Search, we've created our Azure OpenAI and our storage account, and we are ready to go. I'm going to jump back to my process documents. And as you saw earlier, I've already uploaded my JSON schema. I'm going to go to Designer. And here we're going to see that there's a set of red exclamation points throughout this. And we want to update all those. So I'm not going to touch the recurrence. The recurrence is fine. The first thing I want to do is look at the blobs. So this is the blob storage that I want to upload multiple documents to send to my Azure Search. I do have to set this connection, so I don't have a connection here today. I'll say change connection, call this com storage, and here I want to use managed identity. And here we're going to need this connection endpoint that I copied over here for the blob connection store. And just like that, I'm going to say create new. And that's going to create the connection for us to pull that data back. When it gets this list of blobs in that storage account, we're now going to do a for each around that. And we want to read the contents of each of those blobs. I'm going to come down here and just simply use that same connection that I've already created. The container name and blob name are the same. I don't want to change those. Nothing unique there. And then we get down to parse a document. And this is where it's going to take the response from the read blob content. This is going to be this will end up resulting in our parsed text string. So this here is a byte array of a PDF document in this case. It could be a help document or any of the other many forms of supported documents for the Apache service that sits underneath this parse a document. And this is going to return to us a text representation of this information we pass in. Once we get that text representation, we're going to chunk the text here in this new data operation chunk text. Here's the text we're going to parse, and then we simply would select our model here. We're using a GPT-based model, so we select that here, and this will ensure that the token sizing is set up correctly. The token size here does default to 5,000. It was a little vague, and it's a little hard to find the exact token sizes for some of these different models. So just to be safe, I set it at 4096. I think it's really about 4 times larger than this, but just for this demo, I wanted to be sure. So we set that there. Once we chunk our text, then we need to send it into Azure OpenAI, which is going to take our text and return us a vector. And that's done through this connection here. I'm going to say change connection. And this is con OpenAI. And here I simply paste the OpenAI URL that we got earlier. Actually, I said managed identity, paste the URL. And you can see how easy it is using managed identity just to have copy and paste the URLs in here. I don't have to worry about keys and stuff like that. Here is my deployment identifier for the name of the embedding model. I did leave it to default, so it's going to be fine just the way it is. If you did rename it, make sure you paste that name in here. And one thing I will point out about this specific action to OpenAI, occasionally when running my demo, even though it's exactly the same as when you create it again, this was to fail. We get a bad request. So if you do run this for the first time using my imported JSON schema, and you do get a bad request on this, just simply come in here and delete this action, delete it and recreate it. And then that seems to fix the problem. I'm not sure what the issue was. It might have just been a glitch that day or something like that. So if you run into problems, that and probably all these actions in here, if you run into oddity problems like that, just delete, recreate seems to kind of make it work a little better. Then we do a select here, which this is building our input into our Azure Search. So what we're doing here is we're doing this range call. This is getting back how many are in the collection that is returned from our chunked command and our get multiple embeddings up above. So this will tell us whether we have one row to import, if we have multiple rows. So that gets us our length. And then we come through and do chunk the data, title, vector text, chunk ID, and parent ID. The vector text here, we'll want to take a look at that. And this is from our call to get multiple embeddings. This is going to actually be the embeddings. And as we see up here, this chunk is actually going to be the value that's returned from that. So the other two values down here are just GUIDs that I populated. And then the title is just going to be the name of the blob that it was referring to. And then we come down here to index multiple documents. This is when we're actually calling into our Azure Search and passing in that document. Again, I come over here on our task list and copy that URL. And this is our AI search. Again, I'm going to select that I'm using managed identity and simply create that. Here, we want to select a vector. Remember, I renamed that vector. So this was one I used from a prior example. Click X here. And if everything goes right, I would select that and be able to have a drop down on my vector list. Now, there's many times where this has given me a permission error. If you do get a permission error here, check with your Azure Search to make sure you have the correct permissions for this Logic app, the standard edition Logic app that you're using here. So that's definitely one spot I saw there. Okay, with that, let's save this. And let's jump over and run it and see if we can import our single PDF document that I'd uploaded earlier. Okay, I have found that sometimes this takes a few moments to load. So if it does, you can always hit refresh. Seems to kind of get it to come back faster. And let's go ahead and run. And let's see if we have all our permissions and everything set up correctly. And see if this imports our data. We're going to give this just a moment and I'll be right back. Okay, I let it run just a moment, and sure enough, we were successful. We did run, and let's take a quick look at this to make sure it worked as expected. Okay, and we'll just drill down here real quick, and yep, sure enough, everything executed just like we would like to see. Let's take a quick look at some of these actions here. So this output of this parser document is in fact text documentation for what was a PDF document that was passed in. We then chunked that document, and the output of that is down here. You can see that it is chunking it, making an arrays based on the size that we specified in the chunk data. Get multiple embeddings. We can look at this, and we see, sure enough, we're getting our array vectorization of this returned to us. Select is going to build our search index input, which is going to be here under our outputs. Here's our chunk and our title and our text vector, etc. And then lastly, we are calling into our Azure Search to upload that vector information. Okay, let's jump over to Azure Search real quick. Make sure this worked as we expected. I'm going to do a refresh on this. Sure enough, we see documents 2, and that's exactly what we were expecting here. So now I'm going to come over here and let's go to our storage account. Let's upload a bunch more documents. Go to storage browser, and I'm going to do my inputs and say upload and browse files. I have about 19 other. These are hotel fact sheets from Hyatt hotels, and say overwrite just in case. Okay, and then let's go run it again and see what we get this time. Come back over here and let's execute it again. Now this is going to take it about a minute or so to run. So I'm going to let this run. I'm going to jump back here in just a minute. Okay, now that's completed. We can see here success, and it ran in about a minute, and that was about 20 documents to process. Let's jump back to our search real quick and do a refresh here. You can see we got a lot more documents here. Now, this is great. We got our documents in here, but how are we going about chatting with this data? Let's talk to our data. Let's jump over to our Azure AI Studio, and you can see our deployments here of our 2 models we created earlier. So let's go ahead and click on chat. Now, if for some reason you don't see things that look right and you have other deployments, this current resource drop down, if you had other resources, you could select them here. So make sure you have the right one selected. Let's just go ahead and say list hotels in Dubai. And this is just going to talk with the overall ChatGPT model. So this is using all the data that it has available to it. And you can see here a whole host of different options. And let's see how we could chat with our data. Now, the data I uploaded was PDF documents of hotel fact sheets. So that's going to be a bunch of information about hotels. Specifically, it's Hyatt branded hotels. So if you wanted to have a chat bot that your customers would use, you would want it to only have your hotels in it, most likely. So here I just go add data under add your data. I'm going to select Azure AI Search. Going to default to my subscription. And here's where you need to make sure you're in the same region. It's going to select your AI search and then select your AI search index. We get a nice drop down there. We're going to check add vector search to the search resource because we have our vectorized data. And under our embedding model, from our drop down, we can select our text embedding that we created there. And it's pretty much that simple. We go next. Here we have the semantic search. Going to select that one. Remember, it was pre-created for us when we imported our vector data. So all this is basically done for us. And here I'm going to use system assign identity and click next. And if all goes well, we're going to be able to chat with our data specifically. You can see this under data sources that we have our data here. Now, if you do get a permission error here when you try to chat with your own data, double check your user account permissions against Azure OpenAI. That could be the problem there. Here I'm going to say list hotels in Dubai, and we'll give it just a moment. And you can see here it did list our hotels, and it's going to be just our specific Hyatt hotels. So we got our Hyatt Regency, Park Hyatt, and the Grand Hyatt. I've actually stayed at all 3 of them. Very nice properties over in Dubai. And we got our reference data here that actually links to our own specific documents that was used to generate this recommendation. So if we'd embedded the full PDF, for example, we could click here and view the whole PDF. So this concludes our demo. This went pretty quick through things. Make sure you download the task list at the link below and go through them step by step. And make sure you walk through this video. You can pause it and replay. I'll use the chapters below. And please post a comment and let me know if you were able to get up and running with Azure AI and Logic Apps and implement the RAG integration pattern. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.